Your ears do not deceive you. You have just entered the Cryptid Creator Corner, brought to you by your friends at Comic Book Yeti. So without further ado, let's get on to the interview.
Hello, and welcome to Comic Book Yeti's Cryptid Creator Corner. I am one of your hosts, Jimmy Gasparo, and I'm very excited because I have a first-time guest. I've had a good run of some returning guests recently, but I think this is a first-time guest to the podcast, and I just had a chance to read his new graphic novel that is coming out October 21st through Mad Cave, or through Maverick, really, the Mad Cave imprint. It is called The October Girl. It is fantastic. I am so excited to talk about it. He is an artist and a writer, and I've been following on social media for a while, especially when the pandemic started. He was putting out like his own free comics on Twitter, and some of them are there, or all of them really are great, and we're going to talk about some of them too. But please welcome to the podcast, Matthew Dow Smith. Matthew, thank you so much for coming on.
Jimmy, thanks for having me on. It's fantastic to finally get to really talk to you about extremely nerdy things.
Yeah, no, that's
I'm all for
it's
it.
what I love to do. But yeah, I mean, there's so much we could talk about because you've had a
Sure.
pretty long and varied career. For listeners who don't know, on maybe we'll get into it a little bit later because I feel like you have a pretty kind of interesting like journey in comics. I heard that you like classically broke into comics by just meeting somebody while you worked at a record store, and
Yeah. Oh yeah.
they were in the wrong store or
Yeah.
to meet someone.
I'll very quickly tell the story. I wanted to do comics. I was living in Birmingham, Alabama at the time where my parents had moved. And I was working in a Musicland record store. And this guy comes in and he's like, "Hey, I'm looking for, Joe Blow." And I'm like, I don't know who you're talking about." He's like, "Oh." So it turns out he had come to the wrong Musicland store. For you kids, Musicland was a chain of record stores. And like he calls his buddy at the other shop and he's like, I'll wait here for you to show up." So we're sitting around talking, and it turns out he's a comic book anchor. And I'm like, "Oh, really? I really want to do comics." And I had my sketchbook with me. And I showed him my sketchbook. He's like, "Yeah, this stuff's like really good. Why don't you, come hang out at the studio?" And he shared a studio with Andrew Robinson. And this is just like Andrew was just starting to do some stuff for Dark Horse. Remember the World's Greatest Heroes? Did you ever
Oh
see any of
yeah,
those books? Yeah,
yeah.
he was doing a couple issues of that, and we got talking, and then they're like, "Hey, you should talk to our editor at Caliber." And they like hooked me up with my first job because he went into the wrong record shop.
That's wild.
So people are always asking, like, "How do you break into comics?" I'm like, work at a record store. I don't
Yeah,
know. But anyways, yeah. And that was 93, 1992, 93. So
yeah.
I've been around for longer than I care to admit.
Well, there's a lot of talent though that came out of Caliber Comics.
Yeah, I mean, Caliber was such an interesting deal. I mean, it was sort of my class of people. It was like Brian Bendis, David Mack, Michael Gaydos. If you don't know Michael's work, he co-created Jessica Jones with Brian.
Yeah,
Phil Hester was around, and kind of before us was Guy Davis. I mean, it's just like an incredible stable of people. And a lot of us really, got lucky and were able to kind of continue on and have careers. We all kind of started out at Caliber Comics because basically they're like, "You can draw, you can do whatever you want. Here you go. You're not going to make a penny." I think
right.
the largest royalty check I ever got from Caliber was like $36.
Yeah, but I
So I'm
mean, you
like,
really cut your teeth kind of figuring out what it is you can do in the medium, figuring out the type of
sure.
stories you want to tell, right? That's like kind of the beauty of one of those things. Like, yes, I'm not I'm not making money, but
Yeah.
there are some benefits to being in a situation like that.
Yeah, I mean, it's got its downsides, but it's also got its good sides. And
Yeah.
and literally, I could just draw a two-page short story and send it to Joe Pruitt, and it would be in Negative Burn, which was, a pretty big deal at the time. It was a pretty
Yeah.
big anthology. And you don't have those kinds of opportunities unless you're self-publishing.
Right. Yeah, that's true. But we're the main focus today. We're going to talk about the October Girl, and
Sure.
I loved it.
Thank you.
Byron, we said before we started recording, I told you that Byron got an advance copy of it, and he loved it, and then he was annoyed because he found out I'd reached
Sorry.
out to you
Sorry,
first.
Byron. Thank you for reading it, Byron. I'm really glad you liked it. Really
um,
sorry.
but yeah, I it had a lot of elements of stuff that I love. I mean, I don't think this is giving too much away. I think it says it on the back blurb, but your main character Autumn has an imaginary friend from her childhood, and
Yep.
very early on, it's revealed that this imaginary friend might be not so
Imaginary.
imaginary,
Yeah.
and she gets, which is something that I've always kind of loved that whenever it pops up in something like that idea, whether or not it's silly like Drop Dead Fred,
Yeah.
or whether there's more, substance to it. And especially when the character of Barnaby, when he first shows up, he is a dapper little guy. Like, I
Yeah.
love his little outfit. But I just loved it. I love where it went, and really, really enjoyed it. The other
Thank
thing
you.
I will say is that my brother Bobby, who is I shout out Bobby every episode. He's the Cryptid Creator Corner's #1 most dedicated fan. Bobby listens to all my episodes.
Hey,
Um,
Bobby.
he'll appreciate that. And on a personal level, my brother's oldest daughter, her name is Autumn. She's
Oh,
currently
cool.
13, and so I know Bobby, you're gonna at least have one sale because Bobby's gonna eat it right
That's
up.
fantastic. That's awesome. Well, it's funny. If you don't know, this is a project that has been living in my head since college. This is actually the very first comic book story I ever came up with. Um, and I it's gone through a bunch of changes over the years. I mean, that's like 35, almost 35 years ago now. And it's gone through a bunch of different changes. There was actually the Evan Fade character, if you remember him from the book.
Yeah.
Sort of the initial version of that, he was the main character.
Oh, okay.
And Autumn was kind of a secondary character. And kind of the more I developed the idea, the more I'm like, the female character is more interesting. The male character feels a little too much like a self-insert. The female character is much more interesting, and there's a lot you can really do with that. So it became that, and I came up with the title, The October Girl, 25 years ago, but I didn't have her name. I didn't know what her name was. I knew her last name would be Ackerman, which is a nod to one of my absolute favorite families, the Ackermans. My roommate in college, Eric Ackerman, and his family, they're all amazing people. And I didn't have the first name. And like maybe 16, 17 years ago, it says like Autumn. It's Autumn. Her first name is Autumn. How stupid am I to not realize that until now? Autumn is a name.
Yeah, it
So
is.
yeah, so Autumn Ackerman it is.
Yeah.
But yeah, the imaginary friend thing was kind of interesting because I didn't the fear with things like this is everybody likes to have a hook for their book. It's like some easy thing to sort of pin on. And I think fairly early on, everyone really gravitated towards this idea of oh, it's her imaginary friend, but he's real. And I'm like, yeah, but this isn't Drop Dead Fred. This
Yeah.
is that's the starting point. It goes somewhere very, very different. But it's sort of funny when you talk about the story and people sort of latch onto, okay, that's a concept I kind of know. So they gravitate towards that and kind of come up, oh, this story must be this. But that's not where it goes at all. It goes to Ray Bradbury land. It goes to my own personal things that I really love in stories.
Yeah, I mean, what I really liked about it, I love your artwork.
Thank you.
First of all, I absolutely love the character design. Like I said, Barnaby's a dapper little gentleman, which I really liked.
I was
Um,
just joking today with my editor that because she loves Barnaby, and one of her notes is always like, "There needs to be more Barnaby in this scene." And we got a review that mentioned, like, shouted out Barnaby, and I'm like, I'm gonna have to do a Barnaby one shot, aren't I?
yeah,
So,
You
Just
probably will.
yeah, yeah.
One day. Well, I like, speaking of, I mentioned Drop Dead Fred just because that's the first thing that popped into my head when,
Sure.
like, oh, an imaginary friend, made real, sort of. But I think of with other stories when you have that idea of like an imaginary friend comes back in adulthood. Um, it's a lot of those stories are immersed in like the kid dealing or the adult now dealing with like unresolved trauma. And
Yeah.
I don't, you know, there's not that isn't really like overt in terms of Autumn. She's like on the cusp. She's not, she's like 18. She's in that period where she's kind of, she's still in school. She has a job. She's thinking about college. That's not really what, your story goes really. It goes in, I think, some much more imaginative, fanciful places, obviously, but I really appreciate that. I think you give Autumn a lot more, like, agency, which I really liked. I felt like that really, like, made it for me.
It's a fine line, and it's sort of like a very difficult thing to sort of thread when you're building these kinds of stories, at least for me, is like a bunch of stuff has to happen to her. She doesn't want it to happen, but it's gonna happen. And
Mhm.
I spent a lot of time trying to work out at what point of the story does she go, "Okay, I'm gonna do this now." And I just had so much fun kind of particularly writing her little monologues and stuff. I put so much of myself into this book, which is like sort of terrifying when you
Mhm.
put this much of yourself in a book. But there's always been that sense of, and I'm sure it's true of a lot of creative people, and I certainly suspect it's true of more than just creative people. That sense of like looking out at the world and being saying, is this all I get? Is this all
Yeah.
there is? It's just this?
Right.
And I was a really imaginative kid, and I, constantly reading comic books and really into movies and things like that. And I just kind of sort of remember it didn't really happen to me until college, where it kind of was like looking at adulthood and being like, oh man, I am so screwed. Like this is not what I was hoping for at all. And I don't know. There's something about that emotion that I even to this day, and I'm 50. I'm in my 50s now, and even to this day, like I can still I feel that really, really deeply, that the world doesn't work the way that I wish it would.
Right.
And so it was really fun to come up with a character that was like that's kind of her entire thing
Yeah.
is, what is this? No, this is not what I want. I was reading all these cool books when I was a kid, and there were fairies and magic, and where are all the fairies and magic? And then she discovers that maybe she should have been a little more careful with what she wished for. But
Right. Right. As more and more of things are revealed to her in terms of the night folk, um,
mm,
and the adventure that she kind of goes on. And I was surprised how fast the story went. Like it really starts to pick up steam. With comic books, we talk a lot about like the uh the economy of storytelling, but even with
yeah,
like a graphic novel that you can allow like certain things to breathe, it still feels like you're not wasting like a single panel. And
yeah. I hope not.
you have great character introductions like
Oh, cool. Thank.
Barnaby, Fred. At one point she meets like a relative of hers, and we
Ah,
see a
yes.
glimpse of them like a little bit before. Like there's just so many like little things like that that I really enjoyed. And Evan's introduction too, when she meets him and you think, oh, maybe this is the guy, and he's just like, I'm just a guy. Like I love
One
all
of
those little things.
the introductions are fun because it's actually I made a choice very early on that I wanted to do the chapter endings like classic Doctor Who episode endings. I wanted
No, when it was
that.
like 4 half-hour.
Yeah,
I
when it's
get
4
yeah,
half-hour episodes. I wanted they called them stings because you'd get the Doctor Who thing that "Ding." I wanted those at the end of every chapter because I just wanted something to drive you into the next chapter. And so the thing with this project is this project's been around a really long time, and we made an earlier attempt to actually do it with Monkey Brain Press at Comixology, and it was one of the first digital first comics.
right. Yep.
And
Was
we
that back in,
we
like, 2012?
yeah, it's like 15 years ago now.
Okay.
But that was like we took a real stab at doing it, but we did it in chapters. And so each one of those chapters, I really wanted to make them. I really wanted people to come back. So I had a lot of fun designing those chapters, and I used them for a lot of the character introductions because it's so much fun to introduce a character that way. It's like, wait, what? Who's this? What's going on?
Yeah.
Why
Yeah,
is that watch glowing?
right. It does propel the story, forward. And I mean, I don't know how I didn't count, so I don't know exactly
Yeah.
how long like each chapter was, but it
They vary. It's
yeah,
11 or 13 when I don't have enough space. And then the last chapters of all these books tend to be way longer because I'm like, "Oh, I got to wrap all this up. I got to
right.
shove all this stuff in at the end."
But even with a graphic
Um,
novel, I feel like sometimes like writers and artists will still kind of use like a standard floppy, like 22 pages or 23 or
yeah.
whatever as like a section. I really like the shorter chapters in this. Like it really did feel like it kept giving it, especially the way you ended it with that like everyone having like a stinger or like it really propelled it.
There's
Really
something
kept the momentum going.
between like 10 or 13 pages that works really well for the way I tell stories. And I don't, not sure what it is. I don't examine that stuff too much because I kind of don't want to spoil the magic for myself. But there's just something like that's the rhythm that I hit, and I like it. And I do like, I love doing these things as chapters. I think there's a temptation. And there was a version of this that we had sort of plotted out that was like just one big story, no chapter breaks or anything, and it was boring. It just like it was the same story, but it just didn't have that same kind of drive. And for a character, Autumn, I love Autumn, and she shares many of my same traits, including thinks about things way too much and spends a lot of time in her own head. And if I wanted to do that, if I wanted to spend some time in her head, you had to keep the story moving, or else you'd be like, oh, another monologue. I don't care. Let me flip towards. Is there an action scene in this book at all? Um, so yeah, so it's all part of sort of. I mean, it's all part of the sort of design, but it's what happened with the story. It's how the story told itself. And one of the things I really love about getting to write my own stuff now instead of just drawing it is I can just do kind of whatever I feel like doing and pretend like I meant to do that. and and I discover the story kind of as I go.
Right.
And even something like The October Girl, which, I've thought about for all these years and planned and written outlines and all this sort of stuff. When I sat down to finally really do it, um, I was still finding new stuff while I was doing it. A scene, something would happen in a scene that I was like, oh, that, I had no idea what that was about.
Mhm.
I hadn't thought about that sort of stuff. And it's fun. And it's one of the things I really like about, sort of now that I've switched over to more sort of kids and teen stuff
Right.
is, you're not writing those 20 pages. You're not, there's a certain rhythm that you have to have for a comic book. And I don't have to do that. I can kind of just let the story happen, and I can discover the story as I go. And I mean, it's so much more fun. You just sort of, most of my career, I've really struggled with deadlines. I've struggled with just, frankly, just being depressed, stuck at a desk,
Mhm.
and really feel sometimes like pulling teeth. But now that I've sort of switched over to doing this kid stuff, I sit down every day. I have no idea what I'm going to write that day, and it just sort of happens, and it's really fun. I mean, I just was I'm working on book 3 of the October Girl right now, and I sat down and I had outlined it because my editor kind of wants to make sure all the puzzle pieces are going to work. And I just sort of like found something new that I hadn't thought about that when I was making the outline, and I just went off and did a few pages of that. And it was just great. I really just I'm just having a great time. I'm really
That's
enjoying myself.
that's awesome. Well, I
Thank
mean,
you.
it shows on the page, I feel like, because it was a joy to read, and I loved it, and I will, you know, can't wait for book 2 and book 3.
Book 2 is gonna be fun. Book 2 is, I'm very curious. There's something that happens in book 2 that I'm waiting to see what people have to say about. That was, it's funny, like, I spent 35 years kind of working on book 1, and I spent, like, a year working on book 2, and now I've spent about, 2 months working on book 3. So, there are there was, like, I always kinda had the idea of where the series was going, and there's certain things that I set up in the first book that hopefully aren't, like, hitting you over the head with what's gonna happen next, but I do know where sort of overall this is going, but I don't know many of the details. I'm just sort of making it up as I go along.
Well,
And I did
that's awesome.
something I hadn't planned in the second book, and so I'm just waiting to kinda see how it goes over with people.
All right.
But
Um, are you in terms of your, writing style and the way that you write, I mean, are you somebody that's a tinkerer on things like because with a story that you've had in your head so long that has been made, in different versions, like when you're like, oh, we're going to do this now, we're going to do it with Maverick. I mean, are you going back and like redoing everything? Or are you trying to salvage stuff from before?
well, it was kind of interesting. So, the issues that we had done before, and they're no longer available, but I think we only got through maybe issue 3 or chapter 3 or 4.
Okay.
Just that the reality was the audience wasn't there yet for digital first comics. It was always one of the top sellers, but really, again, it was sort of the caliber situation where you can do whatever you want, but you're not gonna make any money doing it. But I
Okay.
was at a point of my life where it's kinda like, I kind of actually need to pay rent.
Uh-huh.
Um,
Yeah.
so unfortunately, we shut that down. But so what I decided, and hopefully this isn't too convoluted of an answer for you, Jimmy. There's just a lot of information. There's so
No,
many
it's fine.
years.
I
Um,
like the inside baseball look of this stuff sometimes. Like, I like seeing how the sausage is made.
the initial thought, the initial plan was, we'll take those chapters. We'd only put out, like I said, like I think the first 4,
Yeah.
but I'd done up through chapter 6, and I'd written through to the end. I just hadn't drawn anything for the back half of the book. And the original idea was, okay, let's take those issues that are already done. I'll do the other 6. But by the time we sort of had set up, we started really sitting down to do it. Like, it had been years, and I was like, I'm not really happy with this book. I mean, I think it's good, but really, it wasn't made for teens. It was a teen character, but when we did it 15 years ago, YA comics weren't really a thing.
Mhm.
There was no path to do that, to do teen comics. And I had tried to convince a bunch of publishers, like, no, let's do teen comics. Because I was working in a bookstore. YA books were flying off the shelves. It's like, make comics for those guys. Um, and I never got anybody to really go for it. But so by the time I finally got around to it, I'm like, well, maybe this is my chance to nudge it more towards that audience. And then finally, a bunch of other things all kind of came together during the pandemic and after the pandemic, where I just was drawing for kids now, was writing for kids. And I was like, I'm going to just really do this as a YA book. I'm not going to think about the direct market at all. I'm not going to think about anything I've been doing for the last 30 years. if I was going to make a book for teens now, what would it be? And that's how I drew it. And I had told myself, to get back to your actual question, I threw out everything I'd done. I mean, I redrew everything, but I also rewrote everything.
Oh, okay.
And so it's really, really weird. I didn't really look at any of the dialogue I'd written before. I didn't pull those up. I pull the old issues up and look through them. I just did it. And it's mostly exactly the same.
Is it really?
Yeah.
That is pretty funny.
It's mostly exactly the same. Some of the dialogue is a little bit different. Some of the dialogue is a little tighter. There's a couple sequences that are changed, but
Okay.
it's mostly all the same. And I
Wow.
just happened exactly the same again, more or less, which is really weird.
Yeah, that is.
Um,
That is
so
almost like the story telling itself, right?
it really kind of is. I mean, like I said, I mean, there's been different versions of this story, but it definitely settled. It definitely settled at one point. It's like, this is the story that it's going to be, and and it is what it is. And now it's finally done. And it's really funny. Like, there are people like some absolutely fantastic people online who are like, "We ever gonna like read the rest of that?" And I'm like, I can't talk about it yet, but maybe. And now
Yeah.
you can. So
Yeah. Oh, I think it's a wonderful story. I mean, it's
thank you.
anchored it's such a fun world in terms of the night folk, but it's just anchored with Autumn, who is a very, she's a very real character. She's trying to figure out what's next. Is this all there is to life? She's a bit, you know, a bit messy, but she's got a
A
good
bit
heart.
messy is a very nice way of putting it.
No, I try.
Well, I always when with my writing process and all the things that I've done on my own, especially since the pandemic, um, I always start with the character first. I start with a character that I want to live with for a while. Um, and there's something about them that I find interesting. Amelia Shadows, which I had done first as an adult character, that I was doing the free comics I was doing on Twitter during the pandemic, and now I do
Right.
them as kids comics that I've been posting on my Patreon. It's just the character I like. She's a smart aleck, little magician lady, and I just like her, and so I like telling stories with her. It's just fun,
Yeah.
and I don't spend a whole lot of time working out plot, working out each step. I kind of one of the things that I was doing with those Twitter things. So just to back up a little bit, I never intended just to be an artist. I actually, when I got into comics, I wanted to write and draw my own stuff.
Mhm.
And I think very early on, I kind of agreed to come in and be an artist on things like, freaking Starman, which was my favorite comic at the time, and Sandman Mystery Theater. And so I kind of got stuck in the "you're an artist" lane. And I spent all my time trying to convince people to let me write stuff. And I got to write a couple of things here and there. But during the pandemic, we all shut down. I I had been drawing a issue of House of Whispers for Vertigo, and they let me finish it, and then that was kind of like it. Um, And so I was just kind of sitting there going, well, if this is kind of the end of comics, I'm going to go out the way I want. And I'm going to start just writing and drawing stories that I've always wanted to tell. So I did 3 or 4 different stories, several of which were just things that had been in my head for several years. Um, but what I discovered doing that is I never knew where the stories were going. I had a character I liked. I had like a starting point. I had like a general idea of what the story was about, and I just sat down and I just did it. And I sort of discovered over, doing 3 or 4 books that way, and I'm not saying they're perfect, I'm not saying they're genius, but they held together. And
Mhm.
so I learned to kind of trust that if I have a character I like and I have a setup that I like, I will find the story and it will make sense. So far, that has not failed me. Could happen any day now. I could finally hit the story where I just get to the end and I'm like, I have no idea how this ends.
Yeah, well, I remember when you were posting on Twitter, you know, comics, and I remember seeing Amelia Shadows, and I think was there was there Johnny Chaos, or did he
Johnny
come
Chaos,
later?
yeah,
Johnny
Johnny
Chaos,
Chaos.
but yeah, I
John,
meant you. Go ahead.
go ahead.
Sorry.
Well, I was just going to say Johnny Chaos is an idea only slightly younger than the October Girl. It's something that
Wow.
I'd had in my head for a very long time too.
Yeah.
That was the first one I did because I wasn't going to do the October Girl, but I was like, oh, I'll do Johnny Chaos. Johnny Chaos was actually something I'd originally created for Michael Gaydos to draw, but he was a little busy on this Marvel book, Alias, Jessica Jones. So, and I just never got around to drawing it. I just was too busy chasing any sort of paycheck
Yeah.
until, so it was just an excuse to, well, I'm finally going to tell the story. So I was just going to explain how old that story is.
That's yeah, and then Arch Nemesis was one. Arch Nemesis was one that I remember because I think it didn't come out all at once. It's like you were posting
No,
little
I was
segments of it.
posting like every week
Yeah,
I'd post 4 pages
right.
of all these books. Yeah.
Just to kind of like confine yourself to what Twitter would let you put, like in
Yeah,
one tweet, 4 pictures.
exactly.
And I remember reading all of the first time you had put out Arch Nemesis, and I loved it.
Thanks.
I just thought it was. Listeners, if you have no idea what we're talking about, there'll be links in the show notes. So if you want to check out Matthew's Patreon and some of his other stuff. But so I haven't read it in a while. But and correct me if I'm wrong. My recollection of Arch Nemesis was it was essentially like a young supervillain who was trying to get his revenge on the hero that he feels like ruined his
Yeah.
life.
Yeah.
And I loved it.
Thanks. Well, it's again, it's a character I like. I really liked that guy. I liked his attitude. It's revealed in literally the end of the first chapter that the superhero is his twin brother.
Right.
So it's all this sibling. It's like, this guy whose life is just like never really quite come together. And this guy who's just a superhero and is so perfect, and it's his twin brother who ended up with superpowers. And I
Yeah.
just really liked that concept. And again, I had absolutely no idea where that story was going. I just really liked the idea of him like, I'm going to take this guy down, but it's his twin brother. So, we had mentioned this before we started recording, is that I am doing a sequel to this now. It's the next thing I'm doing on my Patreon once I finish the next Amelia Shadows book, is I'm doing sort of a sequel reboot to Arch Nemesis, where the superhero from the first story has twin daughters, one of who ends up with superpowers, and the other of whom really upset about not having superpowers. And she basically, the dad goes off on some mission, and the superpowered sister takes over protecting the city, and she gets kidnapped. And so the very, very grumpy sister has to save her sister, and she's really not happy about it.
Yeah. I love it.
So no, that's the next story where it goes to some fun places, but I think particularly like with those Twitter stories is that I wanted to challenge myself to do things that I hated. So, or not that I hated, that things that I wasn't a huge fan of in comics.
Okay.
Johnny Chaos, I don't like flashbacks in comics. I think, I struggle with them because I feel like they pull you out of the story. So Johnny Chaos with the idea was like, what if I tell a story that's sort of like half in flashbacks? And you never really have the full picture of what's going on. You kind of have to get a sense of it from these little flashes of things you see. So, and then I really hate anti-heroes, or I don't hate them. I don't respond to anti-heroes.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
so I decided to do a book where the main character was an anti-hero, and I wanted to make it so that I liked the anti-hero. So I was kind of just doing things like that and having a good time doing it. And then that kind of just eventually a bunch of other things sort of converged, and that's how I ended up doing this kids and teen stuff. It was
Wow.
just kind of like it's the weirdest thing because it literally was I spent so long. Every editor I ever drew a comic for, I'm like, I write too. Can I pitch you some stuff? Because I'd really like to write. And then having now editors are just like, it's just given that I'm writing and drawing it, which is
Yeah.
like, okay. The
Yeah. I
only
mean,
question is whether I'm coloring it, which I wish I could afford to pay somebody else to do it. Because that's my real weak spot is coloring. I'm slowly learning how to color.
uh, with I mean, there's now what, like 6 Amelia Shadows books,
There
and
are
you're
6 finished books. I'm in the middle of doing the 7th.
okay. And is that Amelia Shadows and the Restless Mansion? Did I get
Mhm.
that right?
Yeah, no, that's book 7. That's the one I'm working on right now.
Yeah.
Again,
Okay.
no idea what's gonna happen with the story. I sort of vaguely know the ending, but
Right.
by the time I get there, it could be totally different.
Yeah.
She
Listeners, if you don't know, Amelia Shadows is, in that kind of magical realm. Her father is like the world's most powerful dark wizard, and like she
her
has a
yeah.
There's a
Er,
skeleton, like,
she has
teacher
a
bodyguard called
ghost she has a
Gustav.
ghost for a tutor called
Yeah, tutor.
Gustav.
That's the word I couldn't think of.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
No, that the adult concept, the adult book starts with what's the line? The only thing worse than trying to kill your father is trying to kill your father and failing.
Yeah.
Um, Her father is the most evil magician in the world.
Right.
And that's the setup for the adult one. And so, sure, I'm going to make that a kid's comic.
Yeah.
So, her father is this incredibly powerful dark magician, and he's training her to be a dark magician too.
Yeah.
So it's sort of, I always kind of talk about it as sort of Wednesday Addams meets Zatanna.
Right.
And she's sort of at a point in time where she doesn't quite realize that her life is a little weird, and that her father is evil. But yeah, so she has this ghost tutor. Just in chapter 1 of the 7th book, she gets eaten by a chair.
Yep.
Like you do. These things totally happen.
Yeah. I mean, I
Um,
love the sense of humor. I did go and look at the first chapter of the 7th one, and where Gustav is kind of claims to be attacked by curtains, and Amelia doesn't believe him, and he has a great line where he goes, "Just be careful that you aren't, like, bitten by a window treatment," or something, and it just
yeah.
made me chuckle. I was like,
Well,
I
I
like
mean,
that."
again, one of the things I really like about doing my own stuff is I never get to really be funny.
Yeah.
And I mean, for somebody who's relatively serious and does very serious comics, I actually my first stuff that I really wrote is I used to write a radio comedy show in college.
Really?
Yeah, I wrote a radio comedy show every Friday. Very much patterned on things like Monty Python and Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, and
Okay.
a British show that not many Americans know, but it's called The Goon Show,
Oh, well,
which
was
yeah.
that early, like, Peter Sellers?
Yeah, it's basically where Peter
Right.
Sellers came
I'm the one
from.
other American that knows it, Matthew.
Yeah, no, there thank you, that's awesome. But
I
I
actually think
got
my
in
friend Patrick Flynn probably knows it as well, so shout out to Patrick.
there are a few, and we're a special little club, but yeah, it's just this sense of humor, and I grew up on all those, like, radio shows, like the Hitchhiker's Radio Show.
Oh, yeah.
And so I think, the other thing I did recently, the DC's Misfits of
Misfits of
Magic,
Magic, yeah.
the middle grade book, which is basically just like, I just got to be funny. I got to be funny for like 140 pages. I could be as silly and ridiculous and as absurd as I wanted to be. And no one told me no.
Yeah.
No one, no one said, yeah, we can't do that. This has to be grim and dark. So,
Right.
there are some jokes in the October Girl, just not many. There are there are a few moments where you are supposed to laugh at the situation, but yeah, when I do the middle grade stuff, it's a chance. It's a chance to just be really, really silly and
Mhm.
have fun. And, let's be honest, comics, I love comics. I've been reading comics, since 1977. Um, but they are an inherently superhero comics, at least, are inherently silly. And, nothing wrong with a really good, serious comic with a lot of layers to it. There's also something really fun about just being like, look how silly this is. This is a dude in a cape and his underwear on the outside.
Right.
So I get to do that with the kids stuff, which is
No, that's
just a lot of fun.
yeah, that's awesome. I mean, I was going to bring up the Misfits of Magic because it seems like with some of the stuff that you've written when you've gotten to write it, and I mean anyone who looks at your career as an artist, you mentioned you got to do Starman, which was like one of your favorite books at the
Yeah.
time, and you've done a bunch of different comics for DC and a lot of different publishers. But when it comes time to this stuff for the stuff that you've written yourself, it seems like if I had to take a guess, a lot of your like favorite characters or influences are
Mhm.
probably in that like DC magical type of realm, like Starman, like Doctor
Sure.
Fate, like Satana, Dead Man, maybe. But it is
Yeah.
so like when you get to then do, kind of the middle grade Misfits of Magic
Oh
and kind
man.
of get to take all these
Mm.
characters and just like, and be funny with them. What is that like?
That whole thing was insane, Jimmy. It really was. Again, this convergence of things that happened that sort of I'm now in this weird third act of my career. My agent, and there's so many moving parts that led to this, but one of the big ones is my agent's been on me for years, to do kid stuff
Mhm.
because that was the big growth industry, the growth sector of comics, which is totally understandable because kids love comics. And, I excuse me, my thing was always, yeah, but like I draw like, all the shadowy Mignola stuff. Like I don't draw for kids.
Yeah.
So through a complicated series of events, I ended up pitching a kid series that I was only going to write, because I wasn't ready. I didn't draw in a style that I felt was ready for kids. And, we didn't have an artist attached, and it had to go to, this one committee, and the editor we were working with was like, "Can you just draw something? Just draw something I can show people, like, sort of what you're thinking." And so I ended up just kinda drawing something, in this style, this kid style,
Yeah.
and, that I just made up on the spot, and I drew it really fast. I drew, like, 6 pages in, like, maybe 6 hours. And, sent it out, and the project never happened. But I was like, I really enjoyed doing that, and I don't think this sucks that much. I wonder what people would think if I, like, did some pieces and, like, put them online and
Yeah.
kind of, this is very manipulative of me to do, but I was like, well, if I was gonna do some characters that are kind of kids characters, it take, characters that we know and turn them into kids characters, who would I do? And I'm like, immediately, the DC Magic characters, because I literally know them like the back of my hand. They are my favorites. I've been obsessed with these characters since college. I've wanted to do a Blue Devil series since I was, a teenager. Um, I just obsessed with these characters. So I just started putting these designs up. And that's what led to Misfits of Magic. Was kinda like, "Do you have a story attached to these?" Like, "Yeah, of course I do."
Right.
And then, boom, I'm suddenly, like, drawing all my favorite characters. And, to their credit, at no point in time did they say, "You can't use Blue Devil, no one knows who Blue Devil is." They just went, "Blue Devil? Okay, sure." And I'm like, "Okay, cool. I finally get to do a Blue Devil book."
Yeah.
I think really the one of the very few notes I got was I had done this whole sort of interrogation scene where the kids have a light on the person who turns out to be kind of behind everything that's going on in the book. My editor was like, I don't think kids are going to get that joke. I'm like, yeah, you're probably right. And then just we changed the scene and moved on. I mean, it was one of the easiest jobs I've ever done. I just had so much fun, and every day that I sat down, and keep in mind I'm coming from really struggling for 30 years and not really not. I always feel weird saying this because everybody loves to make comics, and making comics is great and it's fun, and I'm very lucky to get to do it. But it's not an easy job, and
Yeah.
being a professional comic book artist means sometimes you're sitting at that desk and you're drawing when you really would rather be doing anything else. And it's very, very hard to be creative under those circumstances. So, I'd spent 30 years like that. And then I literally sat down and just worked and was just doing page after page after page. Um, I had, I think, half of it written and laid out before the contract was even officially signed. Because I just was having fun. I mean, my editor literally was like, my editor who I would work with for years and years and years and has like gotten very good at managing me on deadlines and being like, okay, Matt, we need to be done like tomorrow. And I'd be like, okay, great. And then we'd be done tomorrow. And she was like, can you slow down so I can catch up on reading all this? And I just like felt like, oh, okay, this is working really well for me. I'm going to keep doing this. So yeah, it was an absolutely wild experience, and still hoping that we'll get to do more stuff like that. Because those magic characters, I mean, there's just so much you can do with them. They're just so fun. Again, because they're kind of absurd. I mean, you have an Egyptian helmet with the god of order in it, or a lord of order, but on like a little kid's head. That's just absurd and so much fun. So there's just it's the most it's the most fun I've ever had making a comic. And I'm so glad that like I was so worried about going from, you know, not being like super well known, but like, if you know who I am, you had a certain expectation about the kind of work I did. And then suddenly to go off and do something completely different. I was really nervous how that was going to go over, but for the most part, people have been just really, really great. And, everybody seems to be like, oh yeah, Blue Devil, he's great. Why aren't there more Blue Devil books? Why are there not more Blue Devil books?
Maybe there will be.
He's one of the greatest characters ever. How can you not do a Blue? Jeff Johns and I for years talked about. He's almost as obsessed with Blue Devil as me. So we had always hoped to get a Blue Devil book going at DC, but never happened, alas.
Well, it's not too late. You never know.
That's true.
I just think it's remarkable. All the different stuff that you worked on, especially starting at like Caliber, and you mentioned Negative Burn, which was definitely not geared towards kids in terms of
No.
the stuff that was in it, and then this at this point in your career. And now working on the 7th Amelia Shadows book, and October Girl is going to be 3 books, and turning Arch Nemesis into like a kid's middle grade book, and it's just kind of remarkable. And that just how, in terms of pivoting, like just changing your style slightly, ramping up the humor that kids would appreciate, but you keep a lot of the heart of the stories that you tell.
I try to.
And it's interesting. You mentioned a lot of the stuff in terms of humor, like Monty Python, and like I'm a huge Hitchhiker's fan, Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy fan as well. And I know you've gotten to work on some Doctor Who, and Doctor Who was something that always, no matter how silly it got, there was, especially in the like the later seasons, like there was always that kind of heart to it. I have to imagine that that's also an influence of yours.
Oh yeah, no, a huge influence. Particularly there's the season that Douglas Adams was the showrunner on, which is, City of Death, which is sort of
Is that
considered
Tom
the
Baker?
yeah, that was the classic. The City of Death is kind of considered the classic Tom Baker story, classic Doctor Who story.
Yeah.
And it's funny because it's not my favorite Doctor Who story from that era. I grew up on the very, very early Tom Baker stuff, the like gothic horror Tom Baker stuff.
Oh, okay.
And the funny thing is, like, I'm not sure if people will notice it or not with the October Girl, but it's very influenced by that period of Doctor Who where, they did a Frankenstein story. They did, essentially a Trifid story, a Day of the Trifid, or riff on Day of
Mhm.
the Triffids. It's just, that sort of horror mixed with humor. But yeah, like Tom Baker in particular is like, it was always a doctor that just made you feel kind of safe.
Yeah.
He never took anything seriously. So you always felt like, yeah, this is scary, but it's going to be okay because the doctor's here. So yeah, no, Doctor Who, it was funny when the show came back. Um, One thing that kind of messed with me is a lot of tonally, a lot of what they did, particularly with the David Tennant Doctor, was very close to sort of what I was doing, what I had been doing in the October Girl as I was developing it, particularly with Evan Fade. So a
Mhm.
lot of those sort of emotional spaces were the same. It was really weird. It's like, there's something there.
Yeah.
There's something to that emotion, um, to that emotional space that is interesting to mine.
Yeah, I agree.
So I really enjoyed it, but it is funny. Like by the time I finally did this story, I always sort of um, I'd always really uh, what's the right, identified with Evan Fade the most. Like
Yeah.
it's not really a self-insert, but he has, Autumn has some of my personality stuff. Evan has some of my other personality stuff. And I identified with so much. But by the time I actually got to do this book, I actually identify more with Evan's father, who is dead. Not a spoiler, but he's dead at the
Right.
beginning of book one. But
Yeah.
he's an important figure who keeps being brought up. But yeah,
Yeah.
I identify with him way more. Getting old is complicated, man.
It it
But
really is. My grandmother, may she rest in peace, but, she used to say that, when she lived to be 94, but
wow.
into her, I mean, in her 70s and definitely into her 80s, she always used to say about getting older, she goes like, Getting older isn't a sin, but it sure is inconvenient."
Oh, I would have liked her a lot. It is weird, and it is very, very funny. I mean, I think it's one thing to kind of do like Misfits and Magic, where you just kind of, you're just playing, you're just kind of letting it all out.
Yeah.
But like kind of getting back in the mindset of a teenager for the October Girl was kind of interesting. I basically like pulled out all the music that I was listening to in college
Okay.
and just was kind of like getting myself like back in. And it's sort of my pet theory about creative people is that one of the reasons why we can be creative, one of the reasons why we can do what we do is because the kid in us is never really that far from the surface,
Mhm.
and that we're still kind of it's still possible for us to tap into that, and that kind of joy of creation or that need to create,
Yeah.
that need to express yourself and, define who you are.
Yeah.
Um, and yeah, so it's really excuse me, it's really weird to like be at this weird new beginning of a career after 30 years of doing this.
Yeah.
And,
I think it's pretty cool.
I'm very excited about it. I have absolutely no idea what happens next.
Yeah.
I have no idea. We've got the 3 October Girl books coming out. I've got,
Right.
the things I'm doing on my Patreon. And yeah, so it's gonna be an interesting few years, I hope.
Awesome. Well, I'm looking forward to it.
Thank you.
But real quick though, before I let
Mhm.
you go, what music? What music?
Oh man, everyone's gonna judge me by my musical
Yeah,
choices
yeah.
in college.
You brought it up.
I did bring it up. I listened to a lot of XTC, which was, kind of my favorite band in high school and college.
Okay.
Uh, um, don't a Scottish band called Silly Wizard. Um, it's like a
Yeah, do
traditional
not
Irish
know them.
band or Scottish band mixed with a little bit of folk and rock.
Okay.
Crowded House. I listened to a lot of Crowded House. The Smiths. The Smiths
Uh-huh.
was kind of, that was the classic.
Yeah.
Um, and yeah, my favorite modern classical composer from college, John Adams, who's still my favorite modern classical composer, and the entire audience just fell asleep. Oh, and I have to admit my really guilty one. I don't have guilty pleasures, but this is the one. This is the one that my one of my best friends, Dan Waters, and I kind of laugh about all the time. A British progressive rock band called Marillion that very few people know.
No,
Um,
Marillion.
yeah,
All right.
Marillion. They literally have a song based on the book Grendel by John Gardner with all these little medieval guitar parts and stuff. It's
Huh.
if you like early Genesis, that sort of stuff, it is not the kind of music I would normally listen to, but like my neighbor in college played it all the time, and you kind of like it becomes part of your
Story.
yeah, it becomes part of your story. It becomes part of like your DNA. So it's just
Yeah.
I listen to all that stuff and it really is like a freight train straight back into when you were younger. It just opens all those synapses in your brain up again. So
That's awesome. Well, I
it
love
was
that.
fun.
Yeah. Well, Matthew, I really appreciate you coming on. It was so good to talk to you about all this stuff. Listeners, there's going to be links in the show notes to everything. And look, I say it all the time on the podcast, like just because something might be YA or even middle grade, like these are wonderful stories. They're wonderful comics. I especially love the October Girl. Bobby, don't worry. I'll make sure you get a copy when it comes out October 21st. So you and Autumn can both read it. My brother also has identical triplets, so they'll
Oh
probably like it
man.
too. Yeah,
When I
Bobby's a
do
mess.
when I do the third Arch Nemesis book, I'll do triplets.
Yeah. But yeah, Bobby's got triplets. Cass, Coop, and Kip. They just
Wow.
turned 12. So
Oh wow. Well, happy
yeah,
belated birthday to them all.
yeah, Bobby's got a lot going on. But
It's
yeah,
crazy.
the October Girls out October 21st. And if you haven't checked out Misfits of Magic, the DC middle grade book, or I'll put a link to your Patreon so folks can check out Amelia Shadows, Johnny Chaos, and look for Arch Nemesis whenever that comes out, because that I love that story. So I can't wait to see what that turns into, because
I
I think it's
can't
gonna
wait to find out how it ends
yeah.
because I have no idea. Just
Oh,
saying.
all right.
Well,
Well, listen.
thanks so much for having me, Jimmy. This has been a lot of fun.
No, I've thoroughly enjoyed it. So listeners, as I say, every time, rate, review us, do that stuff they tell you to do for podcasts. It really does help. You can find me on Blue Sky or TikTok. Let me know what it is you're reading. Love to talk to you about it. And especially if you get the October Girl when it comes out, let me know what it is you think about it. I absolutely loved it. I thought Autumn was a great character. It's set in this the real world with the night folk encroaching. It is a really great story, and I think you're gonna love it. But yeah, thanks a lot, Matthew.
Awesome. Thank you.
Good night, everybody, and I'll see you next time.